Hello everybody, welcome to Chapter 1, Lesson 3. This is Brianne Perenick and we are working on Robert Morris Math 0900. We are now going to start to work on multiplying and dividing real numbers. We do not have any new vocabulary words for this section. We're going to start by learning the rules for multiplying and dividing real numbers. They are pretty simplistic. If you have a positive number times a positive number, your result is going to be a positive number. If you have a negative number times a negative number, your result is also going to be a positive number. Anytime that you are multiplying a positive times a negative or a negative times a positive, your answer is going to be negative. The rules for division, are exactly the same. A positive divided by a positive or a negative divided by a negative will always yield a positive quotient. If you are dividing any combination of the positive divided by negative or a negative divided by a positive, your answer is always going to be negative. So those are the rules that we have to follow. So now we just have to practice. So our first example here says that last year at college you rented a room at $90 per week for 36 weeks, which included 2 semesters and summer school. This year, you will not attend a summer session, so you will be renting the room for only 30 weeks. Thus, the number of weekly rental checks will be 6 less than last year. Okay? You're making out your budget for this year. You want to know the financial impact of renting the room for 6 fewer weeks. So what we're going to focus on now is how do we solve this problem so that we can see whether we're going to have a surplus, are we going to work out in our benefit, or is it going to put us more in debt? So what you're going to think about is as you are paying out money, think about your checking account maybe. Think about paying out that money. When you make a purchase or write a check, that comes out of your checking account as a negative, doesn't it? So the $90 that we pay is a negative 90 because it's leaving our hands. It is a purchase. It's not going to be money that we get to keep. It's an expenditure. So whenever we have some form of debit coming out of our financial account, that is represented by a negative value. Now, we're going to be paying $90 per week, but we are interested in knowing how much money we're going to save by not paying for those 6 weeks. So these are 6 weeks less than last time. There are 6 fewer weeks. There are 6 weeks that we do not have to pay. So we are going to represent that by a negative 6 because it's the difference between last year and this year. And we're not going to be paying that out. So now we're going to have a negative times a negative, which will yield what type of result? A positive. So now you just need to multiply 90 by 6, and you should see that you will end up with a $540 surplus of money by not doing the summer session. Okay, moving on. We're just going to practice some multiplication problems to make sure that we can do the multiplication of integers and rational and or irrational numbers if we encounter any of those. So I want you guys to go ahead and do letters B, C, and D for me. pause the recording, and whenever you are finished, go ahead and turn it back on. Okay, you should have by now done examples B, C, and D on your own. For example B, 5 times 7 are both positive numbers, so our result is going to be positive, and we should have a positive 35. For example C, we have a negative times a positive. That tells us that our answer is going to be negative. And then from there, we can check for cross-canceling. Since we are multiplying two fractions, there is nothing that will cross-cancel. So from here, we can straight multiply. 2 times 4 is 8. 3 times 9 is 27. And our final answer is negative 8/27. Always check to see if your fraction can be simplified. Ours cannot. And then letter D, we have a negative times a negative, which will yield a positive answer. We're going to make our 3 a 3/1. Check for cross-canceling. There is none that can be done. So now you're going to straight multiply. 4 times 3 is 12. 13 times 1 is 12/13. Check to see if anything will reduce. Nothing will in this particular example. So we can move on. Now, letter D, E, and E, I guess that's supposed to be E and F, my apologies there, that threw me off for a second, are a special type of problem. Now, obviously we can follow the rules I've taught you. Take your negative times a negative, make a positive times a negative is going to be a negative. But what I want you to learn here is that there's a trick to these types of problems when you have more than one type factor that you're multiplying. And the trick is that you can count your negative signs. If the number of negative signs is odd, your answer will be negative. If the number of negative signs is even, your answer will be positive. So you can right off the bat count your negative signs and say 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's odd. My answer is negative. And now you don't even have to think about your negatives anymore. Just do your math. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. And you have your answer. You didn't even have to think about it. For letter F, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 negatives. That means your answer is positive. You no longer have to stress about those negative signs. You're just going to do your math. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, and your answer is positive 16. Please learn those rules. They will apply to division as well, so you can learn the rules of those two things and never have to worry about positives and negatives when it comes to multiplying and dividing. Some properties that we should review is that multiplication is commutative. So just like addition, we can multiply in whatever order we want to, and we will get the same answer. An example of that is that we could have said 4 times 2 is 8, 8 times 3 is 24. Okay? Multiplication of any real number by 0 will always be 0. Anything times 0 is 0, guys. We should know that. Multiplication of any number by 1 will result in that number. So 5 times 1 is 5. 1 times negative 7 is negative 7. That's not going to change. And lastly, the multiplication property is associative. That means that we can group our numbers any way that we want to make our multiplication easier. Someone might look at this first problem on the left-hand side and say, I want to do 3 times 4 and make 12, and then do 2 times 12 is 24. Somebody else might look at that and say, well, I want to group it and make it 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 times 4 is 24. Completely up to you. Next, we're going to work on division. Now, we're going to follow the same set of rules for division. We have negative 15 divided by positive 3. We know our answer should be negative. 15 divided by 3 is 5. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. 24 divided by 3 is 8. We have a negative divided by a negative. Your answer should be positive. 2.4 divided by 0.6 is 4. We have a couple of fractional problems. I'd like you to pause the recording and do those real quick for me. When you're ready, just go ahead and hit play to check your work. Okay, by now you should have been able to check your work. What I like to do for this type of problem is look at what I'm given. I have a negative divided by a positive. My answer is going to be negative. Now throughout my problem, I'm not going to worry so much about my work. So I know that I am going to keep my first fraction the same. It's going to be 12/5. I am going to change my division to multiplication and take the reciprocal of 2/3, which is 3/2. We're going to check to see if anything will cross cancel. My 2 will become a 1, and my 12, why is that little keyboard in the way there? My 12 will become a 6. Let's just do that. And then we can straight multiply. We should end up with 18/5. Whenever we convert that into a mixed number, 5 will go into 18 3 times, and we will have a remainder of 3. So our answer will be negative 3 and 3/5. For the next problem, we have a positive divided by a negative. Our answer will be negative. So we're going to keep our first fraction the same, change division to multiplication, and then we have originally 21/1. So we're going to turn that into 1/21. We can cross cancel. 7 will become 1, 21 will become 3, and then we can straight multiply. 1 by 1 is 1, 8 times 3 is 24, and then we just want to put that down there with our negative, and we have negative 1/24. Lastly, we have negative divided by a negative, so my answer will be positive. Keep the first fraction the same, change multiplication or change division to multiplication, and take the reciprocal of your second fraction. Check for cross canceling. None can be done. So we're going to have 26/21. That is an improper fraction, so we want to convert that. 21 will go into 26 one time, and that will leave us with a remainder of 5. So we have positive 1 and 5/21. So that's it, guys, for multiplication and division. There's nothing more to it. The last thing I want you to remember about division first is that division of 0 by any other number is always going to give you a 0. 0 divided by 5 is 0. 0 divided by 2/3 is 0. 0 divided by 0.56 is 0. Okay? Now, the second thing I need you to remember, and you can't forget this one, is that we cannot divide by 0. It cannot happen. You cannot take something and divide that something into groups of nothing. It's not possible. So 7 divided by 0, your answer is undefined. 64 divided by 0, your answer is undefined. It's not possible to do that division. Okay? Neither of those can be done. Anytime you encounter that type of problem where you are either dividing by 0 or you have 0 in a denominator, you tell me that the answer is undefined. If you have any questions about the things that we have covered in this lesson, please feel free to let me know. I am always available to help. Thank you.